Hello, MCU fans. Today will be my breakdown and reaction to Loki Season 2, Episode 2, and another great episode. Very different episode. Very interesting pacing, which we'll talk about. But yeah, great episode, starting with Sylvie just working that mullet. You gotta love it, right? I mean, leave in the comments. What do you think? Should Sylvie keep the mullet or not? It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Well, as you would expect, many spoilers, so make sure you've seen the episode first. But assuming you have, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Of course, we have the October contest running. Don't forget, all you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. 5 random winners will be announced on a video in early November. And if you're one of the lucky winners, you can choose between one of the books or the steel books above. Best of luck. All right, so a couple quick unfinished business items. People leave lots of great comments on the videos. I really appreciate it. As you know, I try to respond to every single one of them. Sorry if I've ever missed any of yours, but I think I hit them all. But one of the questions was, what exactly was the threshold that we saw in episode 6? And I do think we got at least part, maybe all, but at least part of the answer in season 2. So remember, He Who Remains was describing, everything that they've done has all been written down. He knows about everything. And then suddenly there's thunder rumbling. And he says, we just crossed the threshold. And of course, from this point forward, he's saying, I don't know what's going to happen. And he tells them, you better hurry because the timeline is already branching. So there's a lot going on with this threshold. The thunder, the fact that he's calling it the threshold, the fact that from that point forward, he doesn't know what's going to happen, and the fact that the branches are suddenly going nuts. So at least one of those things, I think they did answer in season 2. Because remember, they left off season 1 with Mobius and Hunter B-15 staring at the monitor, and you weren't real sure what's going on. Are they realizing there's nothing they can do? Did this just happen on its own, and they can't stop the branches? No, we learn in season 2, the General Dox, very frustrated with them, says, under whose authority did you make the call to stop pruning branches? So they made the call. Mobius, when he came back and told B-15 everything that happened, and of course B-15 experienced herself, she knows she was on the timeline. They know they're now killing people when they prune stuff. So they made the call to stop the branching. So I think at least that part has been answered. And I'm wondering if, when that happened, the thunder might have been either a dramatic flare or a real effect of all these branches suddenly going nuts because there's nobody pruning them anymore. They were told to stop. And is it also possible that that was the point when He Who Remains no longer had a script because everything else he had planned out, but now this was up to others to decide what to do. He did not know what was going to happen. So I don't know if we fully have our answer, but I really do think the reason the branches went crazy is because Mobius and B-15 ordered them to stop being pruned, which we saw in season 2. So very interesting. Another question, or at least a comment people have made, is this closed circle of time concept that we saw not only at the end of season 1, but also in Quantumania with Kang, the exiled Kang. This concept of continually going in a circle, which I have theorized, by the way, in earlier videos, as you know, that the void is the end and that it kind of disintegrates time into raw time because it can't destroy it, but it turns it into raw time, which is then sucked into the loom and we go back around the circle again. So we have this concept of a closed circle. What a couple of people have commented on, and I'm sorry I've never mentioned it in a video till now, but we really get the hint of this closed circle by Ouroboros' name, because an Ouroboros is a snake that eats its own tail, and even by Mobius' name, which again is this infinite loop. So yeah, just a cool point that they've been really hinting at time being a circle for a while now. Now, there may be other closed loop elements to season 2. We'll have to wait and see, but certainly time is a closed circle, and both Obi and Mobius indicate that. All right, so on to episode 2. But before we can talk about it, we need to just remind ourselves about something from the end of episode 1, because man, does episode 2 start right off. I mean, don't you feel like you missed an episode, like there was an episode 1.5 or something? Well, keep in mind, we learned in episode 1 that when everybody told, the council in the war room, but particularly X5 learned, you had a life on the timeline. Well, he said, hey, this changes everything. You could tell just by his face. He's like, okay, all bets are off now. Well, Dox then says, no, this changes nothing. So she tries to keep focused on, we still have a mission. But I think that was the big clue. X5 is going to bolt. He's going to go live on his own. And then Doc says, we need to know what happened at the end of time. Find Sylvie. So I think we had two big hints. One, he was going to go find Sylvie, duh. But the other one was he doesn't have any real love for the TVA anymore. This changed everything for him. So we also knew from the end of the other from episode 1 that Loki wanted to go find Sylvie. In fact, he didn't even take the time, someone pointed out, to even say thank you, Mobius, for nearly having your skin ripped off your body. Nope, he's just like, let's go find Sylvie. So yeah, he probably should have said thanks first. But nonetheless, that's why I think this episode just picked right up. They gave us the hints. We knew what was going to happen. So why drag us through that? I mean, clearly X5 found Sylvie. Sylvie told him something. We don't know. I think we learned some things, and we'll talk about that later. But Sylvie told him something, and then he decided to come into the sacred timeline to try to live out his quote-unquote best life. Plus, I do think there's a reason they didn't show us how he did this, because we're going to talk a lot more about that. How on earth did X5 go down to the sacred timeline and start living a life? What on earth? Because notice they say sacred timeline, right? And they distinguish that from branched timeline. So, yeah, interesting, right? Very interesting. We're going to talk more about that. Don't worry. But anyway, so a couple things to cover at the very, very beginning here, where it's clear they're looking for Sylvie, and Loki doesn't think she's there because this isn't an apocalypse, and she's so used to being an apocalypse as he's still expecting. But Mobius is explaining, hey, we came here because we got a hit on the Tempad that belonged to X5 before it went dark. So if X5 is here, maybe Sylvie's here too, right? And both Docs and X5 aren't responding, so this is our only lead. All right, so that leads us into the episode. Now, before I go any further, I want to hit some Easter eggs, because there was a ton of Easter eggs right at the beginning. So one of them, on the right there, is Herbie Rides Again, which is one of the many Herbie movies, which are all on Disney Plus, by the way. You can check them out if you haven't. I remember seeing a couple of these, at least, when I was a little itty-bitty kid. They're great. They were a lot of fun. So become a kid again. Watch them. And on the far right is a remake, or on the far left, rather, sorry, is a remake with Lindsay Lohan, actually, when she was in it. I think it was 2005. So, yeah, good old Herbie, tons of movies. Then the next Easter egg on the right is Kingo's poster, which this is his poster then from the Eternals movie, so you can tell it's the same poster. I do have to wonder, though. They went back to 1977, yet in the Eternals movie, Kingo, pointing to the poster, said, that's my great-great-grandfather. I don't know if that math works. It seems like it would have been his great-grandfather. So maybe they should have had the next poster on the right there. I don't know. Tell me what you think. But that math doesn't quite seem to work, but maybe they don't have very long lifespans, him and his family. Or you know what? I guess you probably wouldn't act for very long, would you, before Hollywood shuns you. You're too old. Anyway, it's just interesting. I kind of did not expect it to be great-great-grandfather, but nonetheless. Third Easter egg, the Phone Ranger. Are you kidding me? On the left there, it's kind of hard to read, but trust me, that's the Phone Ranger, which is this dude. Yes, he was actually in the comics, the Phone Ranger. I got no clue what that's all about. Well, I do. I looked it up. I don't remember him. I think I might have read this comic a long time ago, but he basically has the power to tap into phone lines. So, okay, awesome superpower. And notice he's shouting out, too many telephones have died today. The Phone Ranger is here to avenge them. Really? So I have no clue why they went for this guy for their Easter egg, but I love it. I love it. Deep cut, very deep cut. And then an Easter egg that when we saw the trailers, we wondered, is this going to have a big role in the episode or just a small role? Well, it turns out a very small role, but still a fun Easter egg. So Zaniac is a character that appeared in Thor, back in Thor 3:19, and the spirit of Zaniac takes over Brad Wolf, who, of course, is the person that X5 has assumed the role of. And we'll talk more about whether that was really who he was or not, but we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, Zaniac takes over, the spirit of Zaniac takes over Brad Wolf, who then commits a bunch of murders. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with this episode. However, the next appearance of Zaniac in Thor 371 and 372 involves the TVA. Because yes, that dude on the left, that's a TVA agent. They look a little different than they do in the Loki series. But nonetheless, it's just interesting that Zaniac had the TVA in it. So that's why I think probably they used the Zaniac and the Brad Wolf character as a fun little wink and a nod to the comics. But anyway, just an Easter egg and nothing more. And then, of course, we know it's Brad Wolf because eventually they use that name, but you can see over on the right, Marry Me, Brad Wolf. So, okay, fun little Easter eggs aside, how is he living in the sacred timeline? How is this possible? How did he just suddenly appear there and start living a life, because it is definitely X5. We see that later in the episode, in case there was any doubt. Okay, well, let's talk about this. So one of the reporters says to him, "How do you feel about your meteoric rise to fame?" Well, that's an interesting line. That implies that maybe Brad Wolf wasn't that famous before X5 assumed his role, as assumed being Brad Wolf, right? It could be. I could be reading too much into that, but that's just interesting to note that he had a meteoric rise to fame. So what's going on here? Well, I don't think they want us to know yet, because I think when Mobius ultimately figures out what his original life was on the timeline, and I think by the end of the series will go to live it, I think that's going to be part of his future, or at least make the decision, we might learn more how one goes back to, the sacred timeline to assume their life. I don't think they want us to know right now, but hey, that doesn't mean we can't speculate, right? Okay, so let's try a couple speculations here. Well, number one, the first question is X5 actually a variant of Brad Wolf or not? For the minute, let's assume that he is. But I'm going to go down a different path where he just made up the whole Brad Wolf thing. He decided, you know what? I don't need to go figure out what my life used to be. I'm going to go make up a brand new character, Brad Wolf. So that's a possibility. Set that aside for a minute, though. Let's assume that he actually originally was Brad Wolf, right? And then a variant of him was captured by the TVA, and he became X5. Okay, so how does this work? Well, did he somehow merge himself back into the Brad Wolf life on the sacred timeline? I don't even know what that means, honestly, but maybe there's Kang tech that will let you assume the temporal aura of your original variant. I don't know. I really hope that's not the answer. I'm just going to be honest, because that is so weird. Did he go back and kill the real Brad Wolf? Because keep in mind, if you're a variant, that means the original is still there, right? Some Nexus event happened in Brad Wolf's life that created a variant, and the TVA came and captured him. Well, then there's still a Brad Wolf on the sacred timeline, right? Or did Brad Wolf die? I don't know. Or is it when X5 went back to the sacred timeline, it created a new branch? The only reason it doesn't feel like that's what happened is they were so clear that Sylvie was on a branch versus Brad Wolf wasn't. Now, I have long theorized that the sacred timeline is more of a meta name for all of the timelines that don't create Kangs. So as long as him going into the sacred timeline didn't create a branch that ultimately created a new Kang, I guess he could have created a branch, but let's be honest, that's confusing because they keep calling it the sacred timeline. So I don't think he created a branch. I just don't think that happened. But then there's the other possibility that there never was a Brad Wolf, ever. And that he went back and assumed a brand new role. He's an actor, right? So he's pretending to be Brad Wolf. Okay, well, maybe the Kang tech lets him, quote unquote, butterfly effect and not create a branch and therefore alter history. And there's now always been a Brad Wolf because he became Brad Wolf. That's possible. Or again, it's possible that he created the Brad Wolf identity, but still also created a branch. I don't know. I really hope they tell us, because it's really funky to think you could just sneak back into the sacred timeline and assume the role that your original, the original you before you became a variant had, right? I'm going to guess it's this. It really seems sus, this whole meteoric rise. So I think he created the persona, and I think somehow there's some Kang tech. Maybe what he messed with his Tempad. Remember, we're going to talk more about that. He did something with his Tempad, and maybe that allowed him to not create a branch. Because I think Kang tech seems to be able to butterfly effect. I don't like butterfly effect, but it seems like you can do it. All right, let me know what you think in the comments. I don't want to spend too much time on this beyond this, because I don't think they want us to know yet, but I really hope they answer it. All right, so nonetheless, Mobius and Loki catch up to him. And he's like, hey, it's great to see you both. And then, of course, he bolts. I really loved how B-15 tricks him here and says, it's Brad Wolf. Can I get your autograph? And then yanks the Tempad out of his hands, or at least part of it, so that he can't escape with it. So that's great. Then, oh, man, Tom Cruise would be proud of this scene. They are booking. They are running so fast. I mean, look at Loki. He is like, at a 45-degree angle there. That's impressive, especially in slick shoes. I'm surprised he didn't fall. That is impressive. Then, speaking of impressive, Brad uses the time twister to twist himself. Sneaky. So he went back in time, basically, a little bit. But it's Loki who gets the last laugh because these dudes come up, and at first I was fooled, just like everybody else probably, right? But nope, they're illusions. Sneaky. Then Loki uses his shadows, which he then uses his magic on the shadows, and they grip Brad. That's craziness, right? I don't think he's ever done that in the movies or the shows yet, in the comics perhaps, but that's a cool power. I like that. So anyway, he's definitely gets the last laugh, and they catch Brad. And then even Mobius can't figure out which one's the right Loki. He's talking to the one in the middle, and turns out, no, it's the one on the right. So yeah, very cool. So they go in to talk to OB to try to figure out what on earth is up with this Tempad. OB, meanwhile, is working on how to fix the loom, because all this time the loom has been getting worse and worse and worse, right? It's in rough shape, as he says, and he's trying to figure out how to retrofit a device to handle all the new branches. Because their goal right now is to no longer prune. You know, they've said that's genocide. We're not pruning anybody, but we need to help the loom be able to handle all these new branches. So, all right, cool. Then they ask him, will you look at the Tempad? And I love this. He says it without malice. He says it without, being a jerk at all. He means it when he says, do you think this is a higher priority than preventing a temporal meltdown? Oh my gosh. OB is such a great character. Such a great character. They're like, no, sorry. We'll take care of it. You go do your thing. So he tells them again, hey, you need this book. It's the second time he's given a book to Loki. Everything you need is in this book. And man, Marvel, please release this book. I want a copy of it. I want it yesterday, please. Then they're looking through it, and it's just like an IKEA manual. If you've ever built anything from IKEA, oh my gosh, it is not a fun experience. Legos can be tough too. We built the Death Star. My son and I built the Death Star. That took forever, and many times we had to take things apart and put them back together again. That's what it feels like using this tech book is like. But anyway, I noticed the number 42 is always fun. I think that's a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but which is a great book, by the way, if you've never read it. But anyway, in comes Casey. Casey is the man. Turns out he's a lot smarter than we thought. So he learns that Miss Minutes is helping Renslayer, which Loki's like, oh, wait a minute. Now that you mention it, I heard in the past a conversation between Renslayer and He Who Remains. So basically, they're all partners. They're all in on this. Craziness. Then Casey asks, hey, what are you doing with the Tempad there? And Loki says it's somehow that X5 was able to block TVA tracking. No, that's not what it does, says Casey. It may take me a while to analyze the modifications, but this definitely doesn't block any trackers, that's for sure. So I think this is going to come back and be important. What exactly happened to this Tempad? I'm going to throw out a guess, because I do think that X5 used the butterfly effect, as I said earlier, to basically alter history in the sacred timeline. I think when X5 found Sylvie, he, said, hey, I want out of here. I'm not trying to get you. I'm not trying to hurt you. I want to know what you did. I want to know how you did it. And I want to go live on the sacred timeline. So I'm wondering if she used the Kang tech that she has in the Tempad from He Who Remains, right? She's got his Tempad. If she helped alter his Tempad to allow him to go into the sacred timeline and not create a branch. Total guess, right? But the key is there is something he did to this. So keep this thought around that we need to figure out what he did to that Tempad. All right, so meanwhile, without having to worry about the Tempad anymore, since Casey's working on it, they go to try to soften up Brad. But man, X5 takes everybody down. Brad takes everybody down. He says, first of all, I went down and got my life, which is an interesting line, right? Got my life. So again, did he create a brand new life? Or did he somehow take over the life that, his original him before he became a variant had? Did he assume the life of his original version, if you will? But anyway, he says, I got my life. That makes me think he created a fake life. Anyway, and then he says, what are you mad at me for, right? We all wanted our own life. And then, man, he takes down Loki. Stop trying to be a hero, man. You're a villain. You're good at it. Do that. Ouch. And then he goes after Mobius. I mean, who even are you on the timeline? Do you know? Who might be waiting for you back there? I mean, do you care? You're a nobody, man. You're a nowhere man, he says, which leads finally to the Will Smith slap. Yeah, I mean, they had to have done this because of Will Smith, right? Craziness. But yeah, so Mobius loses it. So what do you do after you lose it? You have some pie. And that is some nasty looking pie. I've had key lime pie before. It don't look like that. Ugh, that is so nasty looking. But I love all these sets. That's just so cool. They're so, I mean, the green colors, the orange, the black, and of course they're eating key lime pie. It is so cool. So then we get an interesting description from Loki about his New York attack. Do you remember that time when I was so angry with my father and my brother that I went down to Earth and held the whole of New York City hostage with an alien army? So he's basically saying I did it because I was mad at my dad and my brother? That is interesting. Is he rationalizing it now and just saying that's why I did it? Because I'm pretty sure you did it because you wanted to rule. But also, I have long believed, and Marvel.com's website actually says that he was also under a little bit of a control from the Mind Stone. It was amplifying his inherent nature. So he still was evil, but the Mind Stone, pushed it and made it stronger. So he was more evil than normal. Nonetheless, very interesting description by Loki there. But this is interesting too. He says, I tried to use the Mind Stone on Tony Stark. It didn't work, so I threw him off the building. So that means he knew it was the Mind Stone, which goes with another thing that's been theorized, that when Loki found Thanos, and Thanos gave him the scepter, he told him what it was. He told him this is how it works, which makes sense, right? Because he used it on Stark. I mean, he had to know this thing was, could be used to take control of people, but he actually knew it was a Mind Stone. That's very interesting. And then he chucks him out the window when it doesn't work. Ouch. Those must have been some major breakaway windows, because the fact that Stark didn't crumple when he hit the window is impressive. But yeah, then he says, let me tell you something. That wasn't tactical. Yeah, he's right. That wasn't tactical. He got angry. But then they get into a really interesting discussion, diving into Mobius' psyche, if you will, where Loki's like, hey, you never wanted to visit your place on the timeline? And this answer is so fascinating. First, he tries to divert and says, well, I'd like to thank the guy who kidnapped me and brought me here because I love it here at the TVA. Does make you wonder, will we get to meet the person that kidnapped him? Was this a little hint? So we'll see. But more importantly, he says, what if it was something good, my original life? I mean, something bad I can handle, but if I've missed out on something good? So see, he's thinking he can't go live that life. But we've already seen Brad could. So I think we're going to be seeing over this season how Mobius slowly more and more wants to learn about that life. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he handles it. If he stays with the TVA, if he goes to live that life on his own, who knows? But I just thought that was very interesting. He wasn't afraid that it could be something bad. He was afraid it could be something good, because then he would be so sad that he didn't get to live it. Wild. All right, so then he turns the focus back to X5, though, and says, look, X5 is a good hunter, okay? So does it really make sense he could spend all that time down there and not find Sylvie? So he's figuring out. He definitely found Sylvie. And then that he might have got a little help from the Tempad. So once again, these questions of what he did to the Tempad. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely that is an important mystery to be solved. All right, so he says, think about it. He found her, but maybe didn't turn her in because he wants to continue to live his best life on the timeline. So now they realize what he did find Sylvie, and Sylvie must have told him something, and that's what led him to go down to the timeline. So we set that aside for the minute. This is really important. Notice the loom is failing because there's so much trying to go in there on the left, so many timelines, that it's trying to suck back in again. And then on the right, you see that it's so much that it's just falling apart, right? The rope that was so nice and tightly wound is falling apart. Well, here's the key. This is why I said in the last episode breakdown that I think both seasons of Loki are happening back to back before anything else happens in Phase 4 in the multiverse. Because I think it's sucking all those new branches in and weaving them in to the sacred timeline. And remember, I talked about the fact that the sacred timeline is isolated. He who remains said, I isolated it. And that if I die and these branches start to form, it will expose the sacred timeline to the Kang Council, to these guys. So that's why I'm saying I don't think the post-credit scene in Quantumania has happened yet. I think the end of season 2 of Loki is going to result in them shutting down the loom and saying there is simply no way to A, not prune anything, which they don't want to do because that's genocide, and B, suck all of those branches in and keep them hidden from these guys. So my guess is that one of the things that will happen by the end is that the sacred timeline will be gone and will then continue to branch out, and the multiverse that's already out there. Keep in mind that these guys are still out there. He did not kill them. They've been out there all this time, and now they will be aware of the 616 timeline. So anyway, the loom is failing. Obi has now figured out what he can do. He's got the device that he thinks will solve it, which maybe it will. We'll see. But he can't open the doors again. The blast doors, if you will, have been closed, and it takes a certain temporal aura, i.e. He Who Remains, to be able to open it. So presumably any of He Who Remains variants will share that same aura, and that's why I'm guessing that Victor Timely comes into play. They're going to bring him in to try to fix this. All right, so I love Obi so much. Even in the face of death, he's like, we're going to die, we're going to die. Oh, hey, nice to meet you. We're going to die, we're going to die. Epic. His delivery, so good, so good. And then it's nice to see that he actually has a fanboy, right? You're Ouroboros? You wrote the TVA handbook? Casey's in love. Will you sign mine for me? Of course I will. I'm happy to do it. Yeah, which is right next to your picture. But okay, it takes B-15 to go, remember the part about all of us dying? Oh yeah, right. So the containment doors, I call them the blast doors. I love Star Wars, what can I say? The containment doors are locked, and only the person who designed it can open it with a live scan from his oral temporal aura. And that's key too, live scan. So they can't just go back and talk to Victor Timely in the past and go, hey, tell us what to do. They're going to have to bring him to the future. That's wild. This is going to get crazy. This is going to get crazy. And as he says, the more those branches grow, the closer this thing comes to melting down. And I'm presuming if it just flat out melts down, that's bad. Now, shutting it off, I think that's going to be where we end up going. But melting down, that's not good. So Loki decides to break Brad. Love that. The title of this episode, Breaking Bad. Very, very clever. So basically says, hey, I'm not trying to be a hero, Brad. I'm a villain. Remember? And being someone that's at least a little claustrophobic, if not a lot, oh man, this killed me. Watching this scene, I'm like, oh, please end. Please stop. Please, Brad. Just tell him what he wants to know, Brad. Please tell him what he wants to know. Oh, my word. I mean, he had to be stuck in something because you can see his skin is pressing against, although I guess that could be CGI. But wow, that was crazy. Until finally he admits, I'll tell you where he is. I'll tell you where she is, rather, Sylvie. She has a new life. So Loki gets what he wants, and look at that. Look at that face. Man, maybe he does have the villainous side still there. Wild. So they're very smart. They're like, Brad, you're coming with. And he's like, no, she's in there. You go ahead. I'm going to head back. I'm a head out. And they're like, no, you're not. I love this excuse because he says, I don't want to be around a variant that killed 400 of our coworkers. Good excuse. But more importantly, we now know she killed 400. Wow. We knew she killed a lot, but 400. Holy mackerel. Sylvie. Wow. That's a body count that Jason Voorhees would be proud of. So then, when they finally see each other after all this time, I love those looks. That's just great. Their looks say it all. They're such good actors and actresses in this. So good. Everybody is so good. But Sylvie wants nothing to do with it, right? She says, I haven't got all day. You going to order something? Or what? But finally, Loki convinces her to come out since it's her break and says, we got a paradox here that I don't understand, basically, right? I saw you in the future, or I was in the future. I saw you. The TVA's in danger. You were there, and I want to know why. Of course, that's from episode 1. And she's like, that sounds a lot like the future's already been written, and we both know that it hasn't, not anymore. So very interesting here. We have a butterfly effect on the future. So something that she has not yet gone to that point in the future, and yet he's talking to her about it. So, man, this is getting really timey-wimey, right? It's one thing for a butterfly effect to go in the past and rewrite things. No, she's literally, they're now talking about her going, something that hasn't happened yet, and I need you to tell me what it is. In fact, I need you to do it because I can't still be here if you don't go there in the future, and oh, my head. That's why I don't like this stuff in general. But I don't mind it in this episode and how they're doing it so far because someone's not in control of it. It's happening randomly. What I don't like is butterfly effect where someone literally can do whatever they want because then they would do that, right? They would keep rewriting time and there's just no point to anything. So I'm okay with this, but it just hurts your head a little, right? But okay, time for these two to shake hands and make up, right? Because he's still mad. You slapped me in the face. I won't forget. But hey, Mobius says, I got you a shake, right? I mean, that makes up for everything, right? It's a shake. It's a McDonald's shake on top of that. It's all good. We're all good. And then I love this. This is like a little bit of a dig on Scorsese, sorry, because Brad says, hey, it's not scary. My movie's not scary. It's elevated thriller, all right? Elevated thriller. That's the new thing, right? It's not horror. It's elevated thriller. But then he says it. He says the word. It's cinema. Thank you very much. Well, I don't know if this guy would agree, right? He hates everything Marvel, but even he has to smile at this joke, right? Very clever. Very clever. All right, so then finally, Brad breaks down, or X5, however you want to look at him, breaks down and says, fine, if we stay here, we're all going to die. Now, Sylvie doesn't buy that for a second, so she enchants him, and we see the scene from last episode, all this for Sylvie, and Hunter D90 saying, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Of course not. They're not using it for Sylvie. They're going to bomb all the branches, as we're soon going to see. So then they see where Dox is located, which, by the way, any guesses as to where this is? I mean, is this somewhere in the TVA? Is this somewhere on the sacred timeline? I mean, it probably just doesn't matter. I mean, they're obviously not on one of the branches they're going to turn around and bomb. We know that. But it's just kind of interesting. But anyway, so then they realize, yeah, they're going to bomb every branch, including this one. So yeah, Sylvie's suddenly realizing even where I'm at is not safe. So I've had some people ask, what's Dox's deal? What's going on? Why is she doing this? Well, they kind of told us in the previous episode, right? Because she said the timekeepers are fake, but their warnings were real. So basically, she's a believer. She believes that if we don't prune these branches, it will be our own destruction. And interestingly, she's kind of right. I mean, yes, she's committing genocide, but if she hadn't done that, everybody would be dead. It really is one of those, do some people have to die so that at least somebody can live? Or do we all just die? Because if they do nothing, they're all going to die. So very interesting. In fact, so we see now this bombing versus resetting a timeline. This really threw me because notice the bombs are being set both within the red lines and past the red lines. So I started to get a little confused because I thought, wait, I thought you couldn't get rid of a branch once it passed red line. Kind of yes, kind of no. Let's look into this because we do have some answers. But yeah, this really confused me at first. Because as he said, the targets are popping up all over the branches. So if we look back to episode 2 of the first season, Loki says, Miss Minutes says, what happens when a nexus event branches past the red line? And that's the key, a nexus event. Well, Loki says, it's when the TVA can no longer reset a nexus event. And then Miss Minutes says, right, and that would lead to the destruction of the timeline. Well, that's, I think, the key here. They didn't bomb it, they reset it. And notice, what are they resetting? The nexus event. So I think before the point where it hits a red line, it is not fully developed into a timeline. Instead, it's literally just an event created by a variant who made, a different decision than the one that they feel is the right one on the sacred timeline. So they go in, they grab that variant, remove them from the equation, and then they reset just the area around that was immediately affected by that variant. So it's not an entire timeline, not an entire universe, however you want to look at it. It's just that little irradiated area. However, once it passes the red line, you now have a full timeline, and that timeline exists across all time, because all points in time exist at once. And if that's one that creates a Kang, you suddenly have a Kang trapped inside the sacred timeline, inside that loom. That's not good. In fact, you could have multiple Kangs if several branches are forming. So I think everything Miss Minutes said here for once was not a total lie. That, yeah, if it goes past the red line, you could very well have the destruction of everything. So what do when a branch goes past the red line? You got to bomb it. You don't reset it. You got to bomb it. Something else really interesting. Look at the labeling on these branches. Notice it says branch 616.44U. Doesn't matter anymore. The key is they're labeling the timelines with the 616 numbering. So we're back again to this question of the difference between a timeline and a universe, because 616 is a universe that then has these branched timelines, which at least the TVA is considering part of that universe. That is really interesting. Versus, for example, 838, right? That is a separate universe. Now, I will point out, I do think the reason 838 cannot be part of the sacred timeline is because it had a Reed Richards in it. And if they do anything like in the comics, Reed Richards is an ancient ancestor of Kang. So if you have a Reed Richards, you have a Kang. And granted, he was killed, but he already had his son. Remember, they mentioned his son. That's why I also think the Fantastic Four, when they have their movie, will not be in 616, but in a separate universe. But that still raises the question, well, what's the difference then between a timeline and a universe? Well, I did a video on that. You can go watch that for more detail. But I do want to, here's the key part of it. In the Assembled for Multiverse of Madness, Michael Waldron, who wrote both Multiverse of Madness and Loki, gave an interview. And I do know that I would much rather have it be in an episode, right, canonized, than in an interview. However, this isn't just an interview in some random publication. This is in a Marvel-approved, assembled episode by the guy that wrote the stuff. I mean, this is about as close to canon as you can get. And what he says is, it's impossible, or at least nearly impossible, to travel from one universe to another. In Loki, however, you can kind of hop from one timeline branch, see the key there? Timeline branch to another. But you got to be anchored to some original timeline. What America can do, obviously in Multiverse of Madness, she can jump from one universe to another. She can literally do the impossible. So he's kind of saying it again here, right? This idea that a branch is off of a timeline, a branch timeline is off of a universe, like 616, like we saw. Okay, great. And therefore you can jump in between, and that's how the TVA jumps over to the branches to reset them. Versus America can jump between universes. But the thing I still wish they would explain is, how does a universe get untethered from another universe? Because didn't everything come from one big bang? Didn't they all start at the same point? Aren't they all technically branches? They need to answer that. I don't have the answer. Maybe if enough changes happen, you become a full-fledged universe and no longer a branch off of another universe. I don't know. Let me know your comments, what you think. But what is crystal clear is Waldron is saying, hey, what we're seeing here, that's right, we're seeing a universe, 616, with branches that are timelines. And those timelines are labeled still 616. Fascinating. Also worth noting, they keep using 616. I know some people want it to be 1999-99. I'm not even going to get into that debate, but nonetheless, they are using 616. All right, so here's what I alluded to earlier. Docs, ironically, has bought them some time, because Docs pruned already 30% of the branches, and we'll see a few more are going to get blown away even in the time that it takes to capture her. So, yeah, it's awful. It's terrible what Docs did, but literally everybody would be dead otherwise. Man, the morality plays in this series are incredible. Just incredible. All right, so time to take down Docs, right? So they figured out where she was because Sylvie enchanted X5. And they're seeing that they're using the time doors, and they're connected to the Tempads, and then they're sending in the bombs, and they're blowing up the branches. So it's interesting. We don't really get much of a battle here, but honestly, they don't stand a chance against these two. So I'm glad the battle was quick. I love the fact, though, that when Sylvie grabs Loki's hand so they can use their powers together, she's like, don't overthink it. Meaning, this is just so we can do this blast right here. Nothing more. Don't overthink it. I love that. So then this is a little ominous, right? Is this all of Docs' loyalists? Well, everyone who didn't escape. So that implies they may still have more they got to hunt down, and they could be causing problems. So that's interesting. And then Loki leaving as only Loki can. I love that. That is just so cool. He just walks straight through. And Sylvie decides to join, which is good. She's curious enough to want to check it out. And then we really see the full impact of this timeline bombing. I mean, just look at everybody's faces, just frozen and staring. And I mean, wow, how time is just like splintering and then atrophying and slowly destroying. Although there's some of the little pieces floating out in space, some of those gray pieces not connected to anything. Like, what is going on? That is just quite the visual. But what really brings it home is B-15 just saying those are people. Those are lives. Wow. I mean, yes, it could have been impactful to see people actually being killed and fading away, like we saw in Quantumania when Kang was destroying people and timelines. But really, This I thought was very, very powerful. And then again, their faces, just their expressions. And Sylvie, who kind of didn't care, now she's, she's we're almost ready to break down. So yeah, very, very powerful scene. Loved this. And then we pretty much know what's going to happen next episode, right? They've got a hit on Renslayer's Tempad, so they're going to go after her. And I suspect she has gone to find He Who Remains, or in this case, it's going to end up being Victor Timely. And so I think that's going to be our next episode. But yeah, they're ready to go after her. And then it's kind of interesting. Notice on the Tempad there, or the monitor rather, it's saying that the TVA entity, it's the yellow bar there, TVA entity 221/A. So it seems like her variant number is 221 maybe, and then /A, she's the first of the variants that they've captured of Renslayer. Like there could be a B or a C or a D. It's interesting. But anyway, they found her. They're going after her. Meanwhile, Sylvie's like, nah, I'm a head out. Sorry, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go home if it's even still there. Then Loki just looking off in the distance as she's vanished. And I did have to chuckle. What's up with the dude in white there on the left? Because if you watch this scene, he's kind of sitting there the whole time just doing nothing. Maybe it's a Kang variant. Who knows, right? Or maybe it's just some extra that said, can I be in the scene, please? My son would love to see me in it. But anyway, no clue. But yeah, he's chilling. Meanwhile, Sylvie goes back and please tell me she's not going to become a cougar. Please. This was mildly uncomfortable when she's like, is your mom on her way to pick you up? And then this dude, like he's so crushing on her because he's like, bye-bye, and then chuckles nervously, they put in the closed captioning. Yike. No, I don't think she's going to become a cougar. But still, Sylvie, if he's not even 18, you better not even be talking to him. I don't want you to hook up with him, period. Don't get me wrong. That's out of the question, period. But if he's not even 18, don't even talk to him. You're going to get yourself in trouble. So anyway, too funny. But more importantly, we see that she does indeed have her Tempad. He Who Remains Tempad. So yeah, that's why I'm wondering if she used the tech, if she's figured out the tech, and then she used it to hotwire X5s to do some special stuff. So lots going on, lots to think about. Tell me your thoughts. Did you like this episode? What do you think it's going next? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget, we do have the October contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, and we'll find out if you're a winner in early November. Got the steel books and the regular books, all kinds of good stuff. Best of luck. And of course, we have the Discord. Here we are talking about all kinds of theories. Man, between spoilers, timelines, and metaphysics, oh my word, those go crazy after each Loki episode. So love to have you come join. Throw your ideas out there. And I will leave a pinned comment with a link to join the Discord. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-changing, ever-growing Marvel Cinematic Universe.